The air was thick with sadness as the bells rang in the small church in the center of Madrid. The news of the death of Elena Rodriguez, one of the wealthiest and most mysterious women in the city, had shaken everyone. Her husband, Enrique, a reserved man, had always remained in the shadows of his successful wife. Elena had been a formidable businesswoman, owning several properties and with a fortune that seemed endless. That day, the sun shone brightly, but inside the church, everything seemed shrouded in shadow. Enrique, with his expressionless face, stared at his wife's coffin, while beside him, discreetly sitting in a corner, was Clara, the woman with whom he had been cheating on Elena for years. The young woman, dressed in a somber black dress, had a vacant look, as though she were not really there. She had come to the funeral for one reason: the money. After the ceremony, as the attendees began to leave, Enrique and Clara approached Enrique's car, silent but with a shared, unspoken understanding. They had plans. He had been designated as the sole heir to Elena's fortune. But there was something Enrique didn't know. The will had been modified in the last days of his wife's life. The bank where Elena kept her assets was one of the most exclusive in Madrid. Enrique and Clara knew that they would secure their future. However, what they did not expect was that when they arrived at the bank, the atmosphere was completely different from what they had imagined. A bank director, a middle-aged balding man named Javier, was waiting for them with a serious expression on his face. "Mr. Rodriguez, the situation has changed," Javier said firmly, not taking his eyes off Enrique. Enrique frowned. "What's going on? I'm the only beneficiary, right?" Javier didn't respond immediately. Instead, he glanced at Clara with a faint smile. "There's something you should know, Mr. Rodriguez," he said. The tension in the air was palpable. The director leaned forward and, in a lower tone, added, "Mrs. Elena, before her passing, left very clear instructions regarding her legacy, and you, sir, are not the only one who has been benefited." Confusion filled Enrique's face. Clara, upon hearing these words, turned pale. However, it was clear that something was wrong. What did this mean? Was there something they didn't understand? Javier handed them a sealed envelope, but before they could open it, the director spoke again in a grave tone. "Everything will be clarified when you open this envelope. But I warn you, this will change everything you thought you knew about Elena and her fortune." Turning point. Enrique and Clara looked at the envelope, unsure of what to expect. The news they had just received was merely a harbinger of what was to come. The tension was unbearable. Clara and Enrique sat in the elegant office of Javier, not daring to open the envelope. The room was bathed in warm light, but the atmosphere was charged with doubt and fear. Finally, Enrique broke the seal and unfolded the paper. What he read left his face ashen. "This will was signed a week ago in my presence. Enrique, I leave you the property of all the estates and businesses, but there is one condition. All my fortune will be donated to a charitable cause that will be revealed in the coming days. To you, Enrique, I leave only what you have at this moment, and nothing more." The paper slipped from Enrique's hands, who couldn't believe what he was reading. "What does this mean? This doesn't make sense." Clara, observing the chaos on Enrique's face, said nothing. Her worried expression gave her away. But at the same time, her mind was calculating the possibilities. Could there be something else behind all of this? Enrique was furious. "This can't be. Why did she do this? How could Elena do this to me?" Clara tried to calm him down, but Enrique couldn't stop thinking about the words of his late wife. If the fortune had been destined for a charitable cause, then he would have no access to anything more than his properties. But something didn't add up. Elena had always been a pragmatic and wise woman, and she would never have left everything to a cause without making sure her money would be used for something significant. At that moment, Javier's phone rang, interrupting the conversation. Javier looked at the number and sighed. "It's the Charity Foundation," he said. "They have more information." When Javier answered, Enrique and Clara exchanged silent glances. The anxiety was palpable. What else could they discover? The call lasted no more than a couple of minutes, but when Javier hung up, his face was even paler than before. "What you've just read isn't everything. The foundation to which Elena left her fortune is not connected to any traditional charity organization. It's a foundation that supports a very controversial project, something that could destroy many people." The revelation from Javier's call left Enrique and Clara stunned. What had Elena really done? The following days were a storm of thoughts, doubts, and decisions. Enrique and Clara, immersed in the mystery of Elena's will, found themselves trapped between the desire to understand what had happened and the weight of the implications it brought. Every day, uncertainty grew like a dark shadow, and what initially seemed like a simple dispute over money was turning into a web of secrets that could drag them all into an abyss. After the revelation about the Charity Foundation, Enrique couldn't stop thinking about Carmen's words. Elena's fortune, far from being a reward for him, had been destined for a greater cause, something that, in his mind, was beyond reason. He thought maybe his wife knew something that he still didn't understand, something that would change everyone's fate. But he also wondered if this had all been a calculated plan to prevent him from enjoying the comfortable life he thought awaited him. Determined to get answers, Enrique and Clara went to the foundation's headquarters, located in an exclusive neighborhood in the city. The building was imposing, with glass walls reflecting the sun, a modern and austere structure that evoked power and mystery. The door opened smoothly, and they were greeted by a woman with a piercing gaze named Carmen. She had promised to give them the answers they so desperately needed, but neither of them knew for sure what kind of truth they would find. Carmen led them to a minimalist waiting room, where the details were few, but everything had an air of seriousness and professionalism. Silence reigned, and the tension in the air was palpable. With each step they took, Enrique felt the weight of the situation increasing in his chest. Anxiety was transforming into an unsettling feeling he couldn't ignore. No matter how rich he was or how big his fortune was, something told him this wouldn't end well. Finally, Carmen led them to a private office, much larger than Enrique had imagined. On the desk were several documents and screens, all neatly organized. Carmen sat down and invited them to do the same. When they sat in front of her, the atmosphere charged with a new intensity. "Mr. Rodriguez, Mrs. Clara," began Carmen, "I know you both have had doubts about the fate of Elena's fortune, but what is here is not just a matter of money. It's something much bigger." Enrique couldn't contain his anxiety. "What haven't you told us? Why did Elena make this decision?" Carmen looked at them intently, her eyes reflecting a mix of respect and gravity. Elena didn't want her fortune to be used as a mere material legacy. She wanted to ensure that her money was used for a cause that could change the world. And that's why she allocated it to research for an experimental treatment. Clara leaned forward, interest evident on her face. "An experimental treatment? What kind of treatment?" Carmen took a deep breath, as if preparing to share something crucial. "It's a medical treatment that could revolutionize the way we understand certain diseases, but it's also very dangerous. The Foundation has been researching the treatment for years, but it's not without risks. Many people have been skeptical. Some have even rejected the advances. But Elena firmly believed in its potential. She thought that if the treatment succeeded, it could save millions of lives." Enrique was stunned. He had never imagined Elena was involved in something so big, so risky. All this time, he had seen her as a cold, business-focused woman, but now he realized there was a much greater depth to her. "Why didn't she tell us?" asked Enrique, his voice breaking with frustration. Why did all of this have to be a secret? I thought I was the only beneficiary of her fortune. Carmen nodded slowly. Elena knew that if she told you, the impact could be devastating. She knew you wouldn't be willing to risk so much, especially after her death. The fortune wasn't meant to change just your life, but the life of all humanity. Enrique fell silent, looking at the floor, processing the information. It was hard to accept, but somehow, he could see the logic in Elena's decisions. Despite everything, he felt that something inside him was changing. He no longer cared only about the money, but somehow, Elena's vision was starting to make sense to him. Maybe this sacrifice, so risky and incomprehensible, was really what she wanted. But Clara wasn't so sure. She didn't share the same vision as Enrique. While he tried to understand the reason behind it all, Clara felt more and more disconnected. The power of money had clouded her vision of what really mattered to her. All of this was just a way to control people's fate, and she wasn't ready to accept Elena's sacrifice. So, what happens now? Clara asked with a cold voice. Are we going to be left empty-handed? Carmen sighed. That depends on you. Elena's legacy is now in your hands, but so is the future of the research. If you decide to donate the fortune to the foundation, the treatment could move forward with all the consequences that entails. If you decide to reject it, the research will stop and the money will be redistributed among various charities. Enrique looked at Clara, then at Carmen. And if we take the money and use it for our own benefit, what would happen then? Carmen looked at them sternly. That, gentlemen, would be an act of selfishness. Elena knew this, and that's why she made everything crystal clear. Only those willing to sacrifice something for the common good may take the money. Enrique and Clara remained silent. They both knew that the decision they made that afternoon would not only define their future, but also that of many other people. Finally, after hours of conversation and reflection, Enrique and Clara made a decision. They decided to donate the fortune to the foundation, not for themselves, but for the future of those who could benefit from the research Elena had started. In that moment, Enrique understood that his wife's true legacy was not the money, but the impact her vision had left on the world. As they left the foundation building, a strange sense of peace overcame Enrique. He had given up the wealth he had longed for, but had gained something much more valuable. The understanding that money, no matter how much it attracts us, can never fill the void of true purpose. The greatest sacrifice you can make is for the good of others. It is in serving others where we find our purpose. Albert Einstein. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Enrique's place?